Welcome to week 4 of our class on epistemology and the search for truth. Today we're going to talk about which are more important, facts or opinions. So which is more important, a fact or an opinion on any given subject? It might be tempting to say fact, but not so fast. So lately we find ourselves lamenting the post-truth world in which facts seem no more important than opinions, and sometimes less so. We tend to want to create our own facts all the time. There's alternative facts and all of this stuff. We also tend to see this as a recent devaluation of knowledge. But this is a phenomenon with a long history. It's not just recently that we think knowledge or expertise is a bad thing. As a science fiction writer, as Isaac Asimov wrote in 1980, anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. The view that opinions can be more important than facts need not mean the same thing as devaluing of knowledge. It's always been the case that in certain situations, opinions have been more important than facts, and this can be a good thing. Let me try to explain. So one thing we have to remember is not all facts are true. To call something a fact is presumably to make a claim that it is true. This isn't a problem for many things, although defending such a claim can be harder than you think. What we think are facts, that is, those things that we think are true, can end up being wrong despite our most honest commitment to genuine inquiry. For example, is red wine good or bad for you? What about dark chocolate or coffee? And was there a dinosaur called a brontosaurus or not? Is Pluto a planet? The Harvard researcher Samuel Arbesman points out these examples and others of how facts can change in his book, The Half-Life of Facts. I remember learning in school that protons, neutrons, and electrons were the smallest particles of an atom. It was taught as fact in science class, but it isn't a fact anymore. Facts can change, which leads us to the question, were they ever facts or just our current understanding that defines something as a fact? Think about that for a moment. And it's not only facts that can change that is a problem. While we might be happy to consider it a fact that the Earth is spherical, we would be wrong to do so because it's actually a bit pear-shaped. Thinking of it as a round, perfectly round globe, however, is very different from thinking of it as flat. Asimov expresses beautifully in his essay The Relativity of Wrong. For Asimov, the person who thinks Earth is a sphere is wrong, and so is the person who thinks the Earth is flat. But the person who thinks that they are equally wrong is more wrong than both. This goes back to my discussion on my own faith last week. I know my faith isn't 100% correct. I'm wrong on so many things, but I desire to get as close as humanly possible to the truth. Yet I'm still wrong about my ideas about God, Christ, salvation. I can't know it completely. As Paul says, we see now as through a glass darkly. While I know I'm to some extent wrong, I hope I'm not as wrong as someone who believes there is no God, or someone who believes in a cruel exclusionary God. So we may not always be fully correct or true, even with our facts, like the facts we learned in grade school about who discovered America, or the smallest particle, or even how many planets there are. Geometrical hair-splitting aside, calling something a fact is therefore not a proclamation of infallibility. It is usually used to represent the best knowledge we have at any given time. It's also not the knockout blow we might hope for in an argument. Saying something is a fact by itself does nothing to convince someone who doesn't agree with you. That happens all the time. Well, this is a fact. End of discussion. Nope, not really. Unaccompanied by any warrant for belief, it is not a technique of persuasion. Proof by volume and repetitionally, repeatedly yelling, but it's a fact, simply doesn't work. Have we not figured this out over the last several years? or at least it shouldn't work. Again, this goes back to epistemology and those methods of inquiry and reason we talked about in the last few weeks. You have to have a justifiable reason, and just saying something is a fact is one thing, but somebody else can come along and show you a very opposite fact. What do you do then? Because see, often two sides of an argument bring their own facts. That's where reason and epistemology come in to help us know which set of facts and which argument is more valid or, in a sense, more true. So then again, calling something an opinion need not mean an escape to the fairyland of wishful thinking. This, too, is not a knockout attack in an argument. If we think of an opinion as one person's view on a subject, then many opinions can be solid. For example, it's my opinion that science gives us a powerful narrative to help us understand our place in the universe. But my faith goes further to help me understand the world than science does. It's not an empirical fact that faith does so, but it works for me and for many others. Again, sheer numbers doesn't make something more true. But I can't just throw out my opinion to convince someone to suddenly fall lockstep into my way of seeing the world either. I can't say, well, it's my opinion, so therefore you must follow this way. But we can be much clearer in our meaning if we separate things into matters of fact and matters of opinion. Matters of fact are confined to empirical claims, such as what the boiling point of a substance is, whether lead is denser than water, or whether the planet is warming. Matters of opinion are non-empirical claims and include questions of value and personal preference, such as whether it's okay to eat animals and whether vanilla ice cream is better than chocolate. Ethics is an exemplar of a system in which matters of fact cannot by themselves decide courses of action. For example, a fact may be that a train is carrying explosives into a city and there are 100 hostages on that train. Those are empirical claims. The ethical dilemma is whether to blow up the train before it gets to the city, thus killing the hostages but saving many people in the city. Facts won't answer that question, and yes, that is the plot of Steven Seagal's movie Under Siege 2. A great and fun way to learn more about the problems and challenges of moral philosophy is to watch the show The Good Place on Netflix. Now, matters of opinion can be informed by matters of fact. For example, finding out that animals can suffer may influence whether I choose to eat them. Also, finding out they taste delicious may also influence my opinion. But ultimately, those questions are not answered by matters of fact. Why is it relevant if they can suffer? Why is it relevant if they taste delicious? So, should we close down the economy to stop the spread of the coronavirus? Your answer, and any politician's answer, is an opinion, hopefully informed by facts of job loss, economic devastation, death statistics, healthcare factors, and a myriad of other facts. But facts alone can't answer the question, and it really goes into ethics if you think about it. What is more valuable, 1,000 jobs or one life? 10,000 jobs or 1,000 lives, one job or 1,000 lives. And even then, it's not that simple because the loss of jobs can indirectly also lead to the loss of life or quality of life, which is also an ethical discussion. It's never just so clear as here's the facts, here's the definite decision we all should make. We really should do a series on moral philosophy and ethics sometime too, whether that's a class like this or a sermon series. But seriously, watch The Good Place. It's a good place to start. See what I did there? So, let's talk about backing up facts and opinions. Opinions are not just pale shadows of facts, or they shouldn't be. They should be judgments and conclusions. They can be the result, or should be the result, of careful and sophisticated deliberation in areas for which empirical investigation is inadequate or ill-suited. So I'm hoping all the politicians who have debated and voted on different stimulus packages came to their opinions and how they voted through careful, sophisticated deliberation based on facts and more. And we know people had different opinions even within one's own party. While it's nice to think of the world so neatly divided into matters of facts and matters of opinions, it's not always so clinical in its precision. For example, it is a fact that I prefer a Reese cup over a Hershey bar. In other words, it is apparently a matter of fact that I am having a subjective experience. But we can heal that potential rift by further restricting matters of fact to those that can be verified by others. While it's true that my candy preference could be experimentally indicated by observing my behavior and interviewing me, it cannot be independently verified by others beyond a doubt. I could be faking it. In fact, I could secretly enjoy Nestle so much more than Hershey, and you'd never know. But we can all agree in theory, in principle, on whether the atmosphere contains more nitrogen or carbon dioxide because we can share the methodology of inquiry that gives us the answer. We can also agree on matters of value if the case for a particular view is rationally persuasive. Now, we might all agree that yes, there is more nitrogen and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because we can test it and show it. We might then disagree on why that is the case, or what the ramifications of that are, because there's different methods of inquiry there, and different ways of showing that, and different facts to look at. So facts and opinions need not be positioned in opposition to each other all the time. Too often we make them seem like there's facts and opinions, and never the twain shall meet, and one's obviously better than the other. They're actually complementary. They have complementary functions in our decision making. In a rational framework, they are equally useful. But that's just my opinion. It's not a fact. So, things to remember and think about. We need facts. We need opinions. A good opinion is informed based on facts and a host of other things. Sometimes facts can change. So just saying something a fact isn't this universal, eternal thing of this is true and nothing else can be argued about it. Sometimes how you test something can give you different facts. And that's why getting to know the methods of inquiry and the methodology they use to find that fact is important. You can have different surveys and get different results. But one survey might follow good standard practices. The other survey might have just asked 5 people. It's like I often see these things like voted the #1 best coffee in the city by people who come into our coffee store. That's not a good survey. So it's always important to look behind the facts to find the methodology of even obtaining those facts. And then when someone states an opinion, you want to know, well, what's their methodology? How did they get to that opinion? What facts did they use? What rational, argumentative, logical processes did they follow? Or was it just, I kind of want this to be true. I don't want it to snow anymore. So I'm going to say the snow is done for the year. That's my opinion. But it's probably not one you should put a bunch of money on in a wager because I didn't come to it through any rational, fact-based process. I just don't want it to snow anymore. So thank you for watching. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email and talk with me. And next week, we'll talk about how critical thinking is critical.